Welcome to 5 on the Go, the ultimate career development podcast, created for students learning to uncover their career paths. Have you ever wondered how to combine the creative world of science with the sharp edge of business? Our guest, Alex, breaks down the art of blending science and business, tackling imposter syndrome, building essential skills, and why networking is non-negotiable. This is 5 on the Go, where your career journey never stops, and neither do we. Alex, welcome to 5 on the Go. We are so excited to have you here today. Welcome back to University of Toronto Mississauga's campus.
Yeah.
I know we were talking just before filming, and so much has changed here for you.
Yeah.
But before we go into anything else, I think it would be great for the audience, our listeners, to get to know who you are, a little bit of your backstory. When did you graduate from UTM, and then where you're at today?
Yeah, thanks. First of all, when I was getting dropped off at the in front of the athletic center, it felt both strange and familiar at the same time. I almost got lost. So it was really good. Last time I was here, it's 2010, maybe 2011.
Wow.
For like an alumni event. So it's good to be back. Thanks for having me.
No problem.
So who I am. So I'm a U of T graduate, first and foremost. I graduated from UTM from the Biotech program back in 2010. And that has sort of been sort of the place where everything started career-wise. And prior to that, I did my undergraduate at UTSC, which is the Scarborough campus.
Yeah, of course.
So a U of T grad through and through.
Through and through.
So I, ever since graduated, actually, as a part of the Biotech program, I've been involved in the biotech and pharmaceutical industry in Canada ever since day one. So it's been 15 years.
15 years.
Yeah, I remember actually I started my first job placement in February 2009.
Wow.
So it's almost exactly 15 years.
Wow.
Walking in here, look at all the young faces, I definitely feel old. And, so...
Or you got me here, so you're not that much older.
Yeah, so ever since then, lots has changed. Mostly, I've been working in the commercial side of the business, so sales and marketing. Started in marketing, and spent a lot of time in the field in sales. And now I'm back in marketing. I work for a company called Medicine Pharma in the rare disease realm, and I'm the marketing manager for the rare disease team in Canada. Yes.
Okay. So, Alex, can you help us understand, because you do have a science background.
Yeah.
But when you talk about jumping into the marketing side of things, there's an art to marketing and how marketing works in the world of getting a product out there. You've been on the sales side as well. Can you talk to us a little bit about the art and science of business and how you got to where you're at today?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I'm glad to think one of the conversations I had with my dad when I was in high school. I remember this conversation clearly. He was just driving me to school, and I think maybe I was grade 11. 2 years before, this is when OAC is still around, right? So I think it was a double cohort.
Yeah.
And he was asking, Alex, it's time for you to think about where you want to do university. A typical Asian parent, right?
Right.
I was grade 11. So at that time, I remember on the spot, I came up with an answer. I said, what, Dad, I want to do science. And my dad's like, oh, well, why did you want to do science? And it was a genuine answer. I remember I said, I'm a pretty curious guy.
Right.
And I can learn a lot of things. But one thing I do want to learn is myself.
Right. In
terms of the biology of it.
Oh,
right. So,
yeah.
That was really the driving force of me, sort of started in science. And I've always liked science. I still like science. And I remember the first year university, again, this is a double cohort. So imagine the first year psychology class.
Right.
And double the size, because grade 12 was graduating at the same time. That was an interesting time. And I remember one of the professors asking, I know most of you being in science, you probably want to go to medical school. So raise your hand if you want to go to medical school. And I can't remember the entire couple thousand people. I can't remember how many people, but a lot of people. Almost everyone raised their hand. There might be like 5 or 6 people that didn't raise their hand, a little tentative. And I remember this, one professor said, look at your left, look to your right, find out number of people that didn't raise their hand. That's the number of people that will get into medical school.
Wow.
And which is true.
Wow.
I mean, statistically,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think entering life sciences, at least back in the days, I don't know about now, the information is a lot more readily available. But in my time, choices to us at the time was limited. You can go to pharmacy school, dental school, you can do research, you can go to medical school. Those are the choices. And those were my choices and my goal for the longest time.
Right.
Until I discovered the biotech program. I remember it was a career fair like this at UTSC, but it was not career, I guess it's a graduate school gathering.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And their tagline was where science meets business. And something about that just clicked immediately.
Right.
I had some exposure to sales as a part-time job.
Right.
Both of my parents were in business, so I had that exposure. So something about it just resonated. Right, so that's kind of how I entered the program, and through the internship program, I entered the biotech and pharma industry. So now to answer your first question about marketing, so pharmaceutical and biotech marketing, to me, it's in many ways not different from sales and marketing of anything else.
Right.
But there's definitely some unique aspect to it, right? You think about, you try to fill a need of the marketplace, right? So you need to get the message out. You have the product positioning, communicate that positioning to the buyer, to the user. So in concept, that's very similar to a lot of things. What makes pharma and biotech unique is your audience. These are typically physicians, doctors, and healthcare professionals. This is also a highly regulated field. You're talking about people's lives here and health here. So there's a heightened sense of regulation, compliance, a law that's involved with it. So I would say, I don't want to get into too much details at this point, but those are some of the unique things that's very specific to the pharma industry.
So it sounds like even though you invested 4 years into a health and life sciences degree, but you positioned yourself into a sales marketing role, knowing that your audience are medical professionals, there's definitely huge transferable skills that you have gained through that 4-year journey to apply it to what you're doing day to day. Do you have any thoughts, comments on that? And maybe our listeners who are going through that same sort of thing, like looking to your left, right, I might not make it to medical school. Touch a little, if you could touch upon a little bit about that and maybe some thoughts that you cross your mind during that period.
100%. So, automatically, just even on the surface level, the product that I deal with, these are medications. And you're dealing with healthcare professionals, doctors, and patients. So by having a solid science background, and a lot of the communications and points and understanding of things are pretty nuanced. So the science background definitely helps. But I think for me, what's sort of translational is not necessarily, and I think it translates to not just in the science discipline, but just an education discipline in general, right? People often ask me, okay, so what is the benefit of like a higher education, undergrad degree, graduate degree, a professional degree for that matter? To me, it's not exactly like what you learn. We're talking about facts. If you talk about the first year biology, it's things you have to memorize. Not necessarily so much of that. I think it's actually the way of thinking, how to process information scientifically or empirically or skeptically. I think that's probably the most important aspect of the job. That certainly is the case for science, but I don't think that's unique to science. I think in the business world, in the finance world, for example, I'm not by no means any expert, but I think as information come in, you have to be able to analyze the information and make decisions accordingly based on your goal and based on everyone that's involved. So, that's very general. But I think that's
a good backdrop, though. That really does help. And I think as listeners are taking in, these pieces of information, help them make their decisions as they move forward as well. I want to go back to that setting you just talked about, the classroom, 2,000 students. Both of us have an Asian background, different parts, but, that cultural influence, does tend to lead us to get into professional spaces, or at least, our parents, I would think, suspect that they would fall into that. I was meant to be an engineer. I knew in the back of my head when I sat down with my dad, but there's maybe a sense that some of our listeners may have a thought of imposter syndrome. And that whole idea of the imposter syndrome for a student who might be sitting in the class who feels like, I don't belong here. Could you maybe take a few moments to explain to the listeners and those that are watching, what is imposter syndrome? And maybe how do you get over that feeling of, I don't belong here?
Yeah, you know what? That's I can't remember if I shared this with you, but it's interesting. Brought up, your upbringing and your cultural background.
Yeah.
So to my dad, when I was pursuing medicine,
Yeah.
I think he was quite proud that I was pursuing medicine because to him that was one of the holy grails.
Right.
The stereotypes for Asians, right? You have three choices: doctors, lawyers, and I can't remember what the third one
Chartered
is.
accountants, maybe?
No, I think it was dentist or something. And if you're a pharmacist, you're the black sheep in the family, right? So it's, all jokes aside.
Right.
But I remember when I applied for the MBATEC program, because at that time, thinking back, there were very few things I was so sure that this is what I wanted to do, and that was one of them.
Right.
And I can count probably with one hand, right? Not many moments like that.
Yeah.
But when I got accepted, that was both, I think, the best day at the time of my life and the worst day of my life, because I remember the disappointment in my dad's face when I told him that I'm not pursuing medicine anymore. I kind of did it. I can't remember exactly, but I may have now told him when I applied for the MBATEC program. So he was quite disappointed, and we almost didn't talk for a few months.
Wow.
Right? So, but when I think the imposter syndrome, I guess in that context, you kind of have to fight exactly what you look for. And I think it's a lot easier, despite all the family tension you have to go through. And we're okay now, by the way. And just want people to know, right? That was short-lasting in hindsight, but at the time it felt like forever. The more sure you are, the better, I think. Because once you're sure of something, I think just human nature. You're a lot more grounded. Doesn't matter how many naysayers out there. I mean, you hear people say, I was going against a lot, like I was by myself. Oftentimes, that's when somebody's sure exactly. You can't exactly explain what it is.
Yeah.
It requires a level of self-knowledge, a level of self-faith. But, for me at the time, I was just so sure, right? And I never looked back until now. I'm still pursuing that career path, and I'm very happy with the choice I made. So in that context, I think that really helps.
Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like, I don't belong here, but yet here I'm at the table, or my voice is being heard, and it really changes for people because they now have a certain level of confidence. But when you're in that situation where you're trying to look for your voice, or you're trying to figure out, why do I belong at this table? Have you ever been in that situation? How did you overcome that?
You know what? I think this is my 15th year now in the industry. This is something I still face every day.
Wow.
And probably will continue to face.
Wow, yeah, okay.
Indefinitely. I think that's a very common thing, right? So, for me, I constantly have to, especially when you're new somewhere or you're one of the junior people on the team.
Right.
And that's definitely sort of the first half of my career most of the time. I think right now I'm only getting used to I'm hitting the average age of the company, right? Before, for the longest time, I'm always a young guy in the company. You kind of have to balance out having a voice, but not to say something stupid and completely destroy your credibility. Right? So for me, specifically, I started in marketing, which in the realm of pharmaceutical is actually an anomaly. Maybe it's a little more common now.
Right.
But at the time, the typical career path is you start in sales and you get into marketing and so on and so forth. So a lot of the project I was working on at the time, it was pretty advanced.
Right.
I was lucky that I had managers and mentors around me that guide me through the process and empower me, but allow me to ask questions while still being myself, right? I think, thinking back, I don't know if anybody will be listening to this, but even until now, my manager now, I'm sure, is showing a lot of patience in me, right? There's a lot of time that's spent on mentoring me. I think it's natural to feel like that.
Right.
And I think it's good, in my opinion. I think it's a spectrum. You can be full of self-doubt. You can be completely no self-doubt. In my mind, at least the phase I'm going through, it's better to go with the self-doubt.
Yeah.
Because they allow you to constantly reflect,
Right.
be introspective and improve, and ask questions.
Yeah.
I think, my one advice I'll probably give to the viewers is don't be afraid to ask questions, right? So especially when you're starting out, you should be free to ask questions and allowed to make mistakes. I think that's probably the ideal environment.
Yeah.
I mean, not everybody had the luxury to choose their working environment.
Yes.
And I would say I was among the lucky ones to have that startup environment, have the mentors around me that show kindness and patience to me. I learned a lot and definitely benefited a lot. So, but don't be afraid to ask questions.
Don't be afraid. I think that is such amazing advice.
Yeah.
I think as students and new graduates, we feel like we're meant to know everything by this point in time.
No one is meant to know everything. Elon Musk doesn't know everything.
That's right?
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of great leaders who have wonderful teams implore that opportunity to ask those questions, because even for a leader, I think upon self-reflection, a question that's being asked may change that pathway of a decision or a product or bringing something out of the market. That's really great advice. Thank you so much for sharing that. I want to go back to something you touched upon briefly in one of your earlier responses when you talked about your part-time job and things like that.
This really brings me back.
It brings me back because I think a lot of our students, listeners, those that are transitioning between roles, sometimes we don't think about the volunteer experiences we have within our community, maybe even those part-time jobs where we're accruing skills and competencies. And just because we've worked in a different space and place, we don't know how to always transfer that over onto our resume, LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us about what that means in helping one build their career, and how do you accrue these skills and competencies?
Yeah, so I think first of all, I want to say hindsight is always 20/20.
Right.
You can always sign meanings going back. Oh, this is exactly why I did it. That's why. I think Steve Jobs once said it. You can only connect the dots of your life backwards, because that's the only way to make sense.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to get at. So I think thinking back, did I purposely seek out opportunities to enhance my future career? To a degree, probably not. Probably just got the highest paid job that I can think of. I think my very first job was working in the Toronto Zoo, being like a line cook at the Pizza at the restaurant, right?
Right.
But going forward, I worked in sales job at retail. And again, at the time, just because my friends were doing it, I wanted some clothing discount, working on certain stores. But thinking back, the kind of confidence and skill that I acquired was probably paved the way for a lot of the things in the future, little things to major things. I mean, we talking about the sales experience, right? So when people think about sales, like what is sales? To some people, especially in the science world, I think there might be a stigma to it. I mean, if I say that, some people may resonate to that. Not to me, right? Because I'm a pretty outgoing guy. I enjoy interacting with people, building a relationship with people. To me, that's what sales is convey your idea and transfer your idea and convince your idea to the other person, so they can use the idea for their own benefit. Make them realize something they may not have realized before. Make them see a different perspective. To me, that was the essence of sales.
Yeah, because sales is all a relationship thing.
Yeah.
There's this whole tie-in with human connections.
Yeah.
So if you're tying in that response to what you think about human connections and how that supports getting to your goals, you want to just touch upon that and the importance of human connections?
Yeah, I mean, I think the world revolves around human connections. I'm a big believer of that, right? So I think there's a lot of talks in the AI and the fear of AI, and it's going to take over everything. I think, to some degree, some job will be replaced.
Right.
But I don't want to be philosophical. This is just my personal opinion.
Yeah.
But if you look at the big problems in this world, a lot of it at an international stage, you know, within industries, in people's lives, I would say most of these problems and challenges are rooted on people's relationships.
Right.
On the flip side, I would say a lot of the major breakthroughs in the human history, right, is based on human collaboration and knowledge sharing. So that's the two sides of relationship. I think when it's done well,
Yeah.
you can achieve almost anything. But, you know, it's definitely, to me, the toughest thing to figure out in life. Because I think people are probably the most unpredictable thing. Otherwise, in the stock market, everybody can kind of figure out what's going to happen. Just fundamental analysis and P&E analysis, right? So, you know, I think the human behavior is fascinating, right? So, I don't know if that answers your question.
It does help out. And so if we're reflecting on everything you've said here, there's so many great takeaways for our listeners to be able to position themselves, to understand who they are, remove biases that they build in themselves, and really overcoming things that they don't understand through human connections by getting out there and networking and things like that. So Alex, I wanted to take a moment to thank you so much for coming back onto UTM's campus, for being a participant of 5 on the Go. We're so excited for our listeners and everybody else to take part in hearing the solid advice that you've given to us. Thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure. And just actually end, one thing I just want to add is you did mention about network. Right? Networking is so important. Right? So I think if you don't know what you want to do, talk to as many people in as many fields as possible. And I think that's the only way to find out. Once you do know, then talk to as many people within that field that you want to get into. Oftentimes, this information are not available on the web. And, you know, I can speak to the pharma industry. It's a very small world. A lot of time, network does definitely accelerate your career 100%.
I mean, the backdrop here of the career fair is 100%. Unbelievable. Seeing all these students come by and connect with different employers goes right down to what you're talking about, networking and understand. Once again, Alex, thank you so much for being here. Coming back on a campus. So proud to have you back. Looking forward to hearing more from you in the near future once again.
Thank you so much.